The morning I flatlined, I had just finished braiding my granddaughter's hair. Her name is Zuri, which means beautiful in Swahili, and she had been sitting between my knees on the kitchen floor, the way I used to sit between my own grandmother's knees decades ago, in a small house in rural Georgia, where the floorboards creaked like old hymns and the smell of collard greens never fully left the walls. I remember the feeling of the plastic comb in my hand, the gentle resistance of her thick coils, the way she hummed something low and wordless while I worked. She was 7 years old and already the most serious child I had ever known. Serious eyes, serious mouth, but when she laughed, the whole room rearranged itself around the sound. I set the comb on the counter and felt something strange behind my left shoulder blade. Not pain exactly, more like a door opening somewhere inside my chest that had always been locked. I thought it was heartburn. I reached for the bottle of antacids I kept by the fruit bowl, and then nothing, just nothing. Not darkness, not silence, not the absence of things, pure, absolute nothing. The way a word disappears from your tongue right before you say it. My name is Odessa Marceline Thibault. I am 74 years old. I have buried a husband, raised 3 children, survived a house fire, 2 economic collapses, and a Category 4 hurricane that took the roof off my sister's home in Beaumont. I am not a woman given to fantasy. I do not chase strange ideas down unfamiliar roads. I am a retired school teacher who still corrects grammar in restaurant menus and keeps her receipts organized in labeled envelopes. I tell you this so you understand what kind of woman is telling you this story. What happened next changed everything I thought I knew about this world, about the next one, and about the skin I have worn my entire life. The first thing I became aware of was warmth. Not the warmth of a blanket or a fireplace, something older than that, something that existed before fire was ever discovered, before the first human hand ever reached toward a flame. It was the warmth of being completely and utterly known, the way a mother knows the cry of her specific child across a crowded and noisy room without having to search or think. You are simply recognized. You are already found. I had no body that I could feel, no legs, no hands, no aching hip that had been complaining since my 60s. I was something more like awareness traveling through a medium that had no name in any language I had ever been taught. And then I saw the light. I know every person who tells this kind of story says they saw a light. And I know how that sounds. Borrowed, rehearsed, like a line from a film you have seen too many times. But I need you to understand that calling it a light is the same as calling the ocean a puddle. The word exists only because we have no larger word. What I moved toward was not illumination, it was origin. It was the source from which every visible thing had once been poured out, the way a river pours from a mountain spring, except that this spring had no beginning I could locate and no ending I could find. I moved toward it the way a compass needle moves toward north, not by choosing, by nature. And standing within it, or perhaps the light was standing within him, I could not tell, was a man. He was not what I expected. I had grown up in a Black Baptist church on the east side of Savannah. I had seen 1,000 paintings, 1,000 illustrated Bibles, 1,000 Sunday school felt boards with the same figure pressed onto them. Pale skin, straight hair the color of wheat, blue eyes soft as a morning in April. That image had been placed inside me like furniture in a room, arranged by other people's hands before I was old enough to have an opinion about the decor. The man I encountered looked nothing like that. His skin was the color of polished cedar. His hair was dense and tightly coiled, pulled back loosely, and it caught the light in a way that made it look like it held its own small fire. His eyes were dark, not black, but the deep, particular brown of river water in late autumn. and they held in them something I can only describe as the complete history of every tear that had ever been cried by every person who had ever lived. Not sadness exactly, more like full knowledge, the kind of knowledge that has moved all the way through grief and come out the other side into something vast and undefeated. He looked at me the way my grandmother used to look at me when I came home from somewhere that had been hard, not asking questions, already knowing, already holding space. He smiled, and when he smiled, I felt, and this is the part I have struggled to explain to everyone who has asked me since, I felt the absolute weight of every year I had spent apologizing for taking up space collapse into nothing. Like a tower of ash, like it had never been built at all. I want to tell you what he said to me about Black people, because it is the reason I am telling this story out loud after 2 years of keeping it between myself and my daughters and one very patient pastor who cried twice during our conversation. He did not speak in words the way I am using words now. It was more like understanding arrived in me complete, the way a song arrives in your memory, not word by word, but all at once, fully formed, already yours. The first thing I understood was this: the people who have been most broken by this world are not an accident of history. They are not a footnote. They are not a wound that the story of humanity is embarrassed by and trying to cover. They are load-bearing. I do not know a better way to say it. He showed me something, and when I say showed me, I mean I experienced it rather than observed it, the way you experience cold rather than watch it. He showed me the structure of what human beings had built together across centuries, and where the weight of it had fallen, and who had stood beneath it without being asked, and without being credited, and without being allowed to put it down. And the ones who had stood there longest, in this vision or experience or whatever word you want to use, the ones whose backs had borne the most invisible tonnage, they glowed the brightest in whatever light I was perceiving. Not because suffering is good, let me be precise about that, because I have seen this idea twisted into ugly shapes before. He was not telling me that pain is holy or that endurance should be rewarded with more endurance. What he was showing me was more like evidence, the way a tree that has survived 100 storms has rings inside its trunk that tell the whole story of every drought and every flood. The rings do not celebrate the drought. They are simply proof that something lived through what tried to end it. He showed me the names. Not the names in the history books, because many of the names I was shown had never been written in any book. A woman named Philomene, who kept singing when they told her to stop. A man named Erasmus, who taught 7 children to read in secret in a city that had made it illegal. A girl, maybe 12 years old, named Celestine, who forgave something I could not fully see, but whose forgiveness sent a ripple through the people around her that lasted 4 generations. Ordinary people, unrecorded people, every one of them known by name, every one of them loved with a specificity that shook me down to whatever I was made of in that place. And then he looked at me directly and I understood, again, not in words, that he was showing me these people because I was discouraged. I had not told anyone I was discouraged. I had told my daughter Lavinia that I was tired. I had told my son Tandiswe that I was fine. I had sat in church every Sunday for 70-some years and sung the songs and said the prayers and brought the covered dishes to the potlucks. And somewhere in the last decade, quietly and without ceremony, I had begun to wonder whether any of it meant anything. Whether the arc of the universe bent toward justice the way the posters said, or whether that was just something we told ourselves to survive the knowledge that it didn't. He knew. He had always known. And what he showed me was not an argument. It was not a debate or a defense or a theological position paper. It was more like he pulled back a curtain and let me look at the full length of a story I had only ever been seeing 3 inches of at a time. I saw how things connected. I saw how what looked like abandonment from the inside looked like something entirely different from the vantage point I was being given. I saw the way a single act of kindness by one woman in 1943 had altered the course of a family line in ways that were still unfolding in the bodies of people alive right now. I cannot prove this. I cannot show you diagrams. I can only tell you that when you see a thing with your whole self, instead of just your eyes, the certainty it leaves behind is not the kind that needs defending. Here is where the story turns. Because I came back, the warmth receded, the light folded away. I heard a sound like a world reassembling around me, and then I heard Zuri screaming, and a strange man's voice, a paramedic I would learn later, named Obafemi, which felt like its own small message, counting out loud in a steady voice while his hands pressed into my chest. I came back into a body that ached. I came back into a kitchen that smelled like hair oil and the antacids I had never gotten to take. I came back into a world that was exactly as complicated and painful and unjust as it had been 7 minutes earlier. And here's the thing I need you to hear, because this is the part that surprised me most, more than the light and more than the figure and more than all the names I was shown. I was not disappointed to be back. I had been shown something that did not remove the difficulty. It contextualized it. There is a difference between those two things that took me the better part of my life to learn, and then 7 minutes on the other side of living to finally understand in my bones. The world is hard. The specific weight that falls on specific people because of the color of their skin is real, and it is wrong, and it is not minimized by anything I experienced. Do not use my story to tell someone to simply endure. That is not what I was shown. What I was shown is that the ones who endure are seen, are known, are not lost in the counting, even when the world loses count. That is not the same as being told to be quiet. That is almost the opposite of being told to be quiet. I have been asked many times since this happened whether I think everyone goes to the same place, whether I think the things I was shown are true for people who believe differently than I do, whether my particular tradition has the corner on this particular truth. I will tell you what I told my pastor, who is a thoughtful man named Adekunle, who grew up in Lagos and has never once given me a simple answer to a complicated question, which is one of the reasons I trust him. I think the light I moved toward did not check my church membership before it let me approach. I think the warmth that received me knew every version of me. The believing version and the doubting version and the tired version and the one who corrects grammar on menus. And it received all of them at the same time, without asking me to choose which one was the real me. I think what I encountered was not a reward for having the right opinions. I think it was more fundamental than that, more like the thing that exists before opinions are even possible, before language, before the categories we build to sort ourselves and each other. I cannot tell you what that means for every question you might bring to it. I am a retired school teacher, not a theologian. What I can tell you is what I experienced, and what I experienced felt true in the way that very few things in 74 years of living have felt true. Zuri asked me last spring, while I was braiding her hair again. We went back to the kitchen, we went back to the comb, because that is what you do, you go back. She asked me if I was scared. She is 9 now, old enough to know the outline of what happened, young enough that I am still careful with the details. I told her no. She asked me why not. I told her that where I went, I found out that she had already been known before she was born. That her name, beautiful, serious, laughing Zuri, had already been spoken somewhere before any of us down here got a chance to say it. that the love waiting on the other side of this life is not a love that needs to be earned by people who were already beloved before they drew their first breath. She went quiet for a while, the way she does when she is deciding whether to file something under things she understands or things she is going to think about for the next 20 years. Then she said, "Grandma, that's a lot." I laughed so hard I dropped the comb. "Baby," I told her, "you have no idea. I am 74 years old, and I have died once, and I am still here, which is either evidence that the universe has a sense of humor or that I have more braiding left to do. Possibly both. Probably both. If this story reached you and something in it pressed against something in you that needed pressing, the discouraged part, the doubting part, the part that has been carrying weight no one ever noticed, I want you to know that being seen does not require you to have everything figured out. It does not require you to perform certainty you do not feel. It does not require your church attendance record or your theological credentials or your ability to explain the things you believe in language that satisfies people who have not been where you have been. You are already known. That is the wildest, truest thing I have got. If this story meant something to you, leave a comment below and tell me what it pressed on. Subscribe if you want more conversations like this one. I am an old woman with a great deal of living still sitting in me, and I am not done talking yet.